Okay, we are back for Module 2, Chapter 2, Personal Property. Yes, you will see some questions on personal property. So if you want to go up to the Resources tab, we've reloaded everything up, and there is a Chapter 2 that has the information where you can download the book. You don't have to download the book if you don't want to. If you want to just take notes, that's fine as well. But I'm just kind of using the book that I have created and put in the resource module for you if you'd like to do that. So let's think about this. Personal property. Personal property is anything that is movable. If you can move it, it's personal property. So as a real estate professional, when you're showing property or you're selling a home or listing a property, you're going to be going through, and naturally you may set up the kitchen table and write out your listing agreement, or in some cases like me, I type it on my iPad and we do an electronic signature. Well, the kitchen table and chairs is personal property. It will be moved. It can be moved. However, there are some items in the kitchen that might not necessarily be personal property. For example, a dishwasher that's built in and put under the sink. At one time that dishwasher was movable, but now it's been attached to the property that it's considered to be a fixture. It's part of the property. So how do you determine if something's personal property or a fixture? Well, we're going to talk about that because the courts actually use a little test to determine whether something is personal property or a fixture. But for now, I want you to just really focus on and concentrate on and write in your notes, personal property is movable. Anything that's movable is personal property. Now, passing this exam is a lot like learning a foreign language, because you're going to see a lot of definitions and terms that many of you may not know or understand. For example, the word chattel, and I have this right here, C-H-A-T-T-E-L, chattel, is also referred to as personal property. Believe it or not, years ago, slaves and women were considered chattel. They were considered personal property. Personalty is also another word for personal property. And implements, I want to write this down for you here, and I'm a creative speller, so if I spell this incorrectly, my apologies. Implements are considered personal property. Now, what are implements? They are annual plantings that require cultivation. So we could put corn, we could put soybeans, we could add wheat. If any of these items are present, they are considered implements, and they're considered personal property. So if you were selling a farm and a farmer had planted soybean crops, and it's June and the soybeans are just now coming up out of the ground, they're looking pretty good, and you're closing on the farm in July, those soybeans could actually be considered, they are considered personal property, and the owner, the seller, could actually take those with him. Now, naturally, it would depend on what was put in the contract and how those would be conveyed. But for the exam, you need to understand that implements or fruits of industry, these annual cultivated items, are considered personal property. Now, how do you transfer personal property? They love this question on the exam, and the answer is a bill of sale. I mean, you're going to see a question about so-and-so was selling a piece of property to someone else. They were transferring some personal property. How would that be? How would you best convey that property, or how would you include that? And the answer's through a bill of sale. You'll see that you can almost guarantee it. So understand, you don't want to just write the personal property into the sales contract. For the exam, use a bill of sale to transfer personal property. Now, we asked the question here, and we covered this in the module, could something that was once considered real property become personal property? And the answer is yes. If you cut a tree down that was on a property, that tree at one time was real property. You cut it down, put it into logs, it's now considered personal property. And the act of doing that is called severance. I cannot stress to you enough, you need to take those flashcards, you need to write them out or look at those. If you have the digital flashcards that you can download, go over those definitions, because they will use the words within questions, either as answers or within the question. And if you know the terminology, you'll be able to get those questions correct. So severance is how we convert something from real property into personal property. Now, could something be personal property and then convert to real property? And the answer is yes. You could take bricks that were laying outside your house, loose on the ground. It's personal property. They're movable. If you take those bricks and cement them together, they now become real estate, or a fixture, a part of the real estate. Same way with a lot of things like a built-in dishwasher that I talked about and other items. So, for this specific chapter, really understand what personal property is. It's movable. Understand implements. Know the various other meanings and definitions for personal property. Chattel. You have personalty is another way we can do that. Really remember and understand that to transfer personal property, you need what is called a bill of sale. Now, we also talk about trade fixtures and non-trade fixtures. Trade fixtures are considered personal property if the owner installed, if I rented this office here and I put this board up on the wall, even though it looks like a fixture because it's been attached to the wall, it's considered a trade fixture because I have a real estate school, correct? So I can take this down with me before the lease goes and take it with me. If you ever go to a QT or you go to JCPenney or any of the big stores in a mall, they have shelving, they have racks and various things. Those are all considered trade fixtures. If you went to an O'Charlie's and all of the booths that are attached to the wall, those are trade fixtures. O'Charlie's owns those. They can take them with them prior to the lease expiring. Now, what happens if they don't take or remove the trade fixtures before the lease expires? Then the owner of the real estate gets to keep them. And that's called, through the word of that is called a cession, that the owner keeps that. We've got all of these flashcards and items that you can know and get to understand, and it's very important for you to do that. Let's see here. Remember that even though you can take the trade fixtures with you as a commercial tenant, you have to put the property back in the condition you found it. Just want to see if there was a couple of other items we need to know about. In Chapter 2, the last thing we want to talk about is the test the court will use to determine whether something is a fixture or personal property. And we use the acronym entitled MAID. M-A-I-D. MAID. And this is an acronym, which means we're using a letter to explain other words. So the method of attachment. How was the article attached to the real estate? If you put curtain rods up and you drilled holes into the wall, that would be considered a fixture. How was it attached? The method of attachment. The other thing they look at is, was there an agreement? So did an agreement exist? Very important to understand that. We also need to know about the intention of the parties. What was the intention of the parties? And finally, the adaptation of the article. How did it adapt to the article or to the property. And actually that may be adaptation, and that could be does an agreement exist, I think, in my notes. So let me move that around for you here. Does an agreement exist? And this is the adaptation. I'm a creative speller. What do we mean by an adaptation of the personal property? Let's say you were driving into a home that you listed, and the owners had this huge fountain with this big statue, and it's a circle driveway, and it looks perfect with that property. And you sell the property. Excuse me. You sell the property, and the new owners go over, and lo and behold, the fountain is gone. Well, the courts might, excuse me, the courts may look at, how was this attached? Was there what was the intention? Did an agreement exist? But more importantly, they may look at the adaptation of the article and say, that was so, it was just a part of that property, and you probably couldn't take that because the way it adapted to the real estate. What you really need to understand for the exam is they will give you a question, and they're going to say, which of the following, all of the following are methods to determine whether an item was personal property or a fixture, except, and so you'll see all of these but one of them, and you'll see something different. So know this terminology on made. Know personal property, it's movable. Remember what an implement is. Know that severance is when you take real property and now it becomes personal property. Lots of definitions in this chapter. These are not going to be challenging questions. These will be questions you can pass and do very well on, but you need to know those definitions. You need to go over the flashcards. You need to go back over those practice exams that you have on Module 1 and 2. You've now completed, and just keep going back over that information, and you'll do very well on the exam. So we're going to go on over to Module 3 now, take a look at more information.